In a time when our cable news special Capital Tonight report, anchor Tim Boyum sits down exclusively with Governor Pat McCrory to talk about the toll lane project on I-77 in Charlotte. Here's Tim with the governor.
Governor, thank you so much for your time. It's good to spend some time with you here in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's good to be home. I'm going to spend some time with my wife and dog this weekend in my old hometown, and I'm right here in the old city hall where they do have a governor's office, so it's like I'm going back in time. But some things never get away, and we've got some major road issues right here and transportation issues right here in Charlotte region, and we're trying to deal with them. A very complex issue.
Well, speaking of that, there was a court hearing just this afternoon, about a block away, protests from folks, but the judge did rule that the contract is constitutional at this point.
And we're not surprised that the contract is constitutional because we had outside lawyers, the Attorney General's office, and a lot of other people reviewing that contract long before I signed it. So we're involved in this whole contractual process during the past 7 years. The dilemma we're having at this point in time is that people are changing their mind once the contract has been signed. I mean, people who were in and around the political system here in the Charlotte region, from former mayors who are now state senators to former council members who are now state representatives to new mayors, they're changing their opinion of what they want to do with regard to toll lane options, or managed lanes is the term, which is, and most people don't realize we're not just talking about I-77. This was a plan that was developed by local leadership in the Charlotte region. It was not developed out of Raleigh. It was developed by the local region right here in Charlotte, just like we do in 17 other regions of the state. It's the regions that develop their transportation plan. That's then interconnected by North Carolina Department of Transportation. But once those decisions are made by the region, as it was 7 years ago and through several votes between now and then, started actually in the Perdue administration, we move with those decisions, including signing of contracts. And so when politicians change their mind or duck for cover, as they're doing in this region, there are ramifications that need to seriously be considered, and I welcome that discussion and ramifications, but there's got to be a clear understanding of those ramifications.
But the decision does essentially either rest with you or the legislature. So where do you stand on this? Do you want this project to move forward?
I want a decision by the local leaders on this project. Without a decision, it's hard for me to direct my DOT to continue to look at toll lane options on I-77, I-77 South, 485 interchange, and also 74. I don't think most people realize this is not just the I-77 toward toll lane option. It's also I-77 South, Highway 74, and also 485. This is all one plan. It's not 4 or 5 separate plans. It's all one intersected plan. The only difference with I-77 is there's been a contract signed with a private vendor, which has been in the making now for many, many years, and the contract was signed last year. And if we cancel that contract, there are financial ramifications that I, as governor, do not have the authority to deal with. So when people say, well, you can cancel the contract, it's really a misrepresentation, because I don't have the authority as governor to pay a penalty or a legal penalty as a result of canceling a contract that was signed over a year ago.
So you say you want a decision. If the local organization, the regional transportation organization, comes to you and says, we want to cancel this contract, are you prepared to move forward with their decision then?
If we get a decision to cancel this contract, it's also a decision, I think, to suspend any future work on other toll lane options on those 3 or 4 other corridors. Because what I don't want to do is spend more state money, which puts things in jeopardy. And if they change their mind again, they're in the same situation. So what I would do is immediately suspend any work, and then I'd have to take it to the state legislature regarding how do you pay for the penalty of not only the cancellation of a contract, that, by the way, was initially started under Mayor Fox, was the agreements also with the federal government were signed by now Transportation Secretary Mayor Fox, Secretary Fox, and also agreed upon by the regional elected bodies. So I do not have the authority to find money to pay for the cancellation of a contract. That can only be done by the state legislature. come into session until mid-year. And I would anticipate the state legislature, regardless of what some of the local senators and House members are saying, is they'd probably say the Charlotte region would have to somehow deal with that loss. There's another group of money that also has to be considered. When the local elected officials and leaders made the decision to go with the toll lane option in order to speed up the construction of these corridors, because the congestion is absolutely terrible. And listen, this should have been dealt with 10 or 20 years ago by the state of North Carolina, but it wasn't. And until this governor came into office, we changed the formula. But this area still decided to stick with the toll option, toll lane option. By the way, it's not the whole lane is not tolled, despite what the media keeps repeating. It's the new lanes are tolled, so there's a toll lane option. But there's also over $100 million of incentive dollars that were given to this region to do this. So if it's canceled, the local decision makers will also lose that $100 million, which will go into the state coffers for transportation across the state of North Carolina. So the local elected officials have told me what they don't want. For example, the Mecklenburg County Commission, by an 8-to-1 vote with the chairman reversing his initial decision, has told me what they don't want, but they haven't told me what they do want. And that's what I requested of them, which gives me hesitancy to continue to put state resources in the expansion of the toll lane, because I'm getting a lot of mixed information on are they just talking about the I-77 lane, or are they talking about other lanes? And also the mayor. We've got a new mayor and a lot of new elected officials. They're giving very mixed signals. Are they only against the I-77 lane, or are they on the other three corridors, toll optional lanes on the other three corridors? And so the City Council is going to have a vote on this Monday to direct their representative, which has been voting with it the whole time. The mayor, I think in her campaign, stated that she was against I-77. I have not heard what her statement is on the other lanes. She also has the option to veto whatever decision is made by the Charlotte City Council, as I happen to do in this office many times. But there are ramifications, and the public and the elected officials need to clearly know what those ramifications are. I'm here to take the guidance of what the local elected leaders want to do, and that's what we have been doing for the last 4 years.
So just to be clear, if January 20th they come to you and say, we want to cancel this contract, you will help them move forward with it?
I will immediately suspend any activity on that contract so as to limit the cost of any more losses on that contract.
So you can suspend it but not cancel?
Huh?
You would suspend it but not cancel?
I would suspend it and not cancel it because I'm not sure what the cost ramifications are, and I do not have the authority as governor to deal with those cost ramifications. As the lawsuit stated today, it's the state legislature which would have to deal with the financial budget of those ramifications.
You saw the letter from the 9 lawmakers from this area that are both Republicans and Democrats. They say that this project can be single-handedly taken out of the TIP, which is the larger project, without issue.
Well, you tell me what the issues will be then when you take that project out regarding toll lanes, and then what's the Ballantyne area going to say? Oh, we have toll lanes, or what's I-74 going to do? We have toll lanes. I need to know how they feel about toll lane options in all the corridors, not just that one corridor. You need to ask those mayors and city councilmen and state representatives who sign that document, what are they talking about? Because this is a total plan now, and by the way, those state senators and state legislators supported the STI, which gave these options available to 18 regions in the state of North Carolina. So, you know, frankly, and I understand politics, you've got a lot of politicians diving for cover, and part of that is based upon legitimate feedback from constituents who go, this is not the way we should pay or speed up our road construction. But what is their alternative? Now, as governor, I am trying to float more bonds, which we did get passed for transportation. And by the way, some of those state representatives did not support those new bonds at the same time. And but hopefully in the next year of my second term, I will make more proposals to bring more money to North Carolina. But if toll road options is not an option here in Charlotte, it probably won't be an option in the rest of the state, because politicians in the rest of the state will be diving for cover too. And you're seeing it's bipartisan. This was a bipartisan plan accepting the plan, and now you're starting to see a bipartisan objection to the plan after a contract has already been signed. But, you know, people are allowed to change their mind as long as they clearly understand the ramifications, and I'll do the best job I can in recommending options that are available if they do cancel this. But there are some serious options.
Well, they don't have the authority to cancel it. They can just recommend that they want to cancel it.
They make the direction. They make the vote on directing the North Carolina Department of Transportation and this governor on where their road priorities are and how they want to spend it based upon the parameters we have. And I think a little of them are being a little disingenuous in saying that it's not their decision. It's been their decision since before I came into office.
I should ask you the opposite question. If the Charlotte Monday, and then likely if their vote will determine, if the 20th they come to you and say they want to move forward.
Well, I guess there will still be some other small towns that will make.
They're pretty heavily weighted. Whatever they decide to do.
The county and the city have the largest weight. It sends a very bad signal to the county commission by an 8-to-1 vote with the chairman. All of a sudden saying when their representative for the last 3 or 4 years have been voting to move on. You know, their hands have been a part of this process, and there are ramifications. And by the way, that might be the best option to go, well, you know what, we need to look at other options, and that might mean a reprioritization of roads in this entire region. And that'll be a big internal debate among the small towns, the county, and the city of Charlotte if they don't have sufficient votes to pass this.
If that vote on the 20th decides to move forward, then is it just status quo? You're going to let it go forward the way it is?
Absolutely, but I will send also a very strong message. You can't go changing your mind in 2 years again. You know, every time you have a change of opinion or elected officials, or some people say, well, I didn't read that part of the contract when they had every option to do that. The state of North Carolina is right now putting money into the other toll lane options. If they are against the toll lane options, now is the time to say they're against it, not just on I-77 corridor, but also on the other corridors. And it's a tough decision. It is a very tough decision because no one wants to pay for roads. And, you know, you can pay for roads through many other different options as opposed to making people pay to take exceptional lanes or a HOV type of lane on certain highways throughout North Carolina. As you know, in Raleigh, we have a total highway that's totally tolled at this point in time. So these are options. I think it's going to send a strong signal to the rest of the state on what the decision is. But, you know, the leadership here in the Mecklenburg, Union, and Iredell County area has to stand up and say, this decision, we're sticking with it. And at this point in time, they're sending very mixed signals to the state of North Carolina. And there's obviously divided leadership. You have maybe city council members, including their reps, who think one thing, their transportation reps. You have a mayor who thinks something else. You have a county chairman who differs from their transportation rep that I think he assigns. It's a very unique situation. That we are in uncharted waters regarding a contract that's already been signed. And then how do you cancel a contract? It's uncharted waters. But as governor, I'm going to follow the lead of the local elected officials. I wish there were more consensus. You know, when I started the mass transit program here in the Charlotte region, we went through very similar dynamics, but we had a coalition of leaders that went through very rough periods and said, this is our decision, we're going to stick with it. And believe me, I had a lot of bleeding on that. You know, in the old days, they called the light rail line the McCrory line, and it wasn't a compliment. Now that it's working, it's called the blue line. And now they're calling the hot line or the optional toll lanes. I've noticed the protesters are putting my name on it.
Your picture was on one of those.
Is that right? Well, which is kind of ironic because it's the local leaders that really decided this, even before I was in office, before I became governor. And we need to clarify that.
Just one last...
But I respect their ability to make these decisions. I think there's been a lack of communication to the general public. And I'm not talking about the I-77 corridor. I'm talking about the other corridors. What I don't want to have happen is in the other corridors, all of a sudden the general public go, what's this all about? We didn't know about it. And most of the media has highlighted only on I-77. This is not just I-77 toward Mooresville. This is also I-77 toward the South Carolina border in the future, 485, which is a terrible traffic congestion, and also Independence Boulevard, 74.
Just one last question on a totally different topic. There's been editorials and some stories this week, so I want to give you a chance to respond to it. The meeting that you had with Duke Energy CEO Lynn Good last year. I know it's a favorite topic.
I've had continuous meetings with not only Duke Energy but other major manufacturers, the co-ops I met with last week. I think WREL's story, I consider it a Seinfeld story. It's a story about nothing. Can you imagine Jim Hunt being criticized by WREL for having meetings with Bill Lee 20 years ago? It would have never happened. This is politics at its worst, and it's journalism at its worst. I meet with business leaders, small business leaders, including today, about every day. And if you're going to tie the hands of governors from building relationships with one of the largest companies in the United States, the largest electric utility in the United States, headquartered right here in North Carolina. Boy, the state of journalism. And to give the assumption that that is something inappropriate. I'm going to continue to meet with them. I'm going to continue to meet with co-ops. I'm going to continue to meet with manufacturers and small business and environmental groups, which I've done also.
Some people are concerned about the perception of the timing of it, because it was while there was legal, legislative, and regulatory wrangling going on that this...
Well, there are always going to be issues going on with the largest companies in North Carolina. When do you not meet with these companies? And by the way, a lot of these decisions are my final decision as governor. Who else makes these decisions but the governor? And in order to make these decisions, you try to get as much information as possible, and sometimes you negotiate, not just with Duke Energy Company, but with where we have legal interactions, we have environmental interactions, we have economic development interactions. But to have a headline in the Charlotte Observer and the Raleigh News and Observer over a WREL story about me having a meeting, which is totally appropriate.
So you met with other CEOs at the mansion last year as well, major CEOs?
Constantly. Or I meet with them in their offices. And I have since met with Duke Energy in other meetings. And environmental groups have done the same thing. So this is kind of a little political hit job, and I'm kind of getting used to it, but I think the level of journalism to be a lead story and then have other networks follow and communicate as though... Can you imagine President Obama being criticized for meeting with, which he does, with the heads of IBM or Apple or Verizon? They do it all the time at the White House, and you don't see a story on that. So I think there's a little politics being played here.
Governor,
and poor journalism at that.
I know your time is precious. I know the 77 issue is really important to this region, so I appreciate you taking the time.
It is. We've got to prepare this state and this region for continued growth. And the question is, how fast do you want to prepare it? And this region initially made a decision to speed up the construction of roles. They wanted to go for toll options. If they're going to change their mind, they need to do it now, before any further costs are put on this project. And we welcome their input and we welcome their decisions.
All right, Governor, thank you.
Hey, thanks
a lot. Appreciate it. Good to see you as always.
Glad to be here.